Scrawn Dog coming in hot. We've got the Americas RMR around the corner, flying to Monterrey, Mexico tomorrow. But this video is coming to you from Copenhagen, Denmark. We've still got the grand finals of the NA Showdown to be played, but my draft for Showdown is dead in the water. We went big on MIBR upsetting versus Pain and then hoping that they could also beat Liquid, and that also predicated everything on Furia getting to finals. Well, Furia lost to EG Black. Furia lost to EG Black. And for that reason, this draft is dead. And I mean dead. We're sitting bottom 91% with no players left. Nitro is my highest scoring player. I think that says something here. So, unfortunately, maybe because I named them Pixies, they didn't perform. But Monterrey should be a different boat. At Monterrey, we have 5 spots in Paris up for grabs, and I think that the most surefire, 100% certain pick for one of those 5 spots, and even potentially the Legends placement, as there's 1 Legends and 4 Challengers up for grabs, is Pain. Pain are the guarantee at the moment. They're the best team from these regions because of the fact that they have Liquid's number. I put Liquid in at number 2, even though they struggle versus Pain. I think that's just a good head-to-head for Pain right now, and I think Liquid clean up versus a lot of these other teams. Definitely versus the lower echelon. There's no way Liquid don't qualify for Paris. I wish I could say the same thing about Furia, but they look a little sketchier. So I'm going to slide them down the list a little bit. I still expect them to get through, but I want to shout out a team like Imperial. I think Imperial, banking right now on Joda, Cello, and Fallen's individual level, Boltz is finding a good groove at the moment, and Vinny has his moments. I actually expect Imperial to move forward to Paris too. They did it for Rio as the last dance with lesser pieces. Now, with the newest inclusions, I think this is a real team with real potential who's already dispatched of complexity a couple of times, who could in a domestic head-to-head deal with the likes of Furia or Pain or MIBR or maybe even Fluxo. I think you guys got to keep your eyes on Fluxo this event, and also 0-0 Nation. They had that playoff run at Pro League, but Fluxo we haven't seen outside the region just yet. We saw them at Fall Finals in 2022. Not bad. Lukowski and Phelps, actual star potential. So that's the batch of teams that I'm kind of keeping my eye on for this draft. But this draft is a weird one. HLTV have been doing some number fudging, we'll put it. All right, they've been inflating the costs of all the players you'd expect to normally draft. I actually like that they've done this just because it makes the fantasy event a little more difficult. It makes you start digging into teams that maybe you'd otherwise ignore. You can't just double down on favorites. You simply don't have enough money. All right, the cash ain't there, and cash is what makes this all go round. So when I think of drafting for this America's RMR, I immediately scroll to Pain. And as much as I would love to pick a couple players here, the bottom of Nekaz and Hardzao has come up because of their recent form. Makes a lot of sense that this team's price tag would be going up because they are the most winning team from the region. I like Big Uzera. I think he's the most consistent piece. But what I really love is what I think could be the #1 player for this entire event and a guy who has star potential. After being so slow when he first joined this, we're going for Zevi. I think that Zevi's clutch ability, his opping, his presence on a map is everywhere. And so right now, Zevi to me is the most surefire piece of this draft. Insta lock-in, no doubts, you cannot talk me out of him. I think that Skulls and Big Uzera are good options if you're trying to save a bit of money with Big Uzera, but with Zevi only 3K more, I'm telling you, he's worth it. Plus you bank in on that AWP role. After Pain, I said Liquid. Now, I understand if you want to divert from me here, but I don't think we can write off a top 10 team in the world on LAN, at an RMR, go back to what they did in Stockholm for the Rio event, and you saw Liquid just dispatch of everybody. So when I look at this team right now, and we go back to Pro League, the group stage, I went with the EliGE pick. It didn't work out. Other players surpassed him. Osi, in fact, did better. Yakinder and Naf as well. So EliGE ended up being the 4th lowest rated player for the group stage at playoffs or Pro League. But in playoffs, that tale changed. EliGE went ham, and he has held that form ever since. He was the only player, in fact, at this NA Showdown to be worth it for Team Liquid. If you had EliGE on your draft, you basically guaranteed yourself a top 15% finish. He is holding them together in this environment, and I think that when we go back to LAN at the RMR, with all these inconsistencies coming through from the players like Naf and Yakinder that we thought were solid, EliGE is picking up slack. So I'm going to go for this. Again, I understand if you doubt Liquid, maybe you don't want to, but I think EliGE is a surefire piece versus lesser teams. He is not going to get caught off by players. He is prepared, and so even with that sketchy opening versus 0-0 Nation, who had a good pro league themselves, I think EliGE is still worth it at 211. Naf and Yakinder, slightly more expensive. OC, who was in like the 198s, is now mid 200,000s, and so I'll spend the few more to get EliGE over OC, but I'm not willing to go any further than that because the prices here for the NA RMR are crazy. I think it's very hard to draft a team at the moment. Quesarado, 240K. Safe is 215. All these players from North American teams that are usually safe, affordable bets are now suddenly that much more expensive. I think it's one of the reasons that I'm too afraid to go for anybody on Furia. You know, Art and Drop both nearly 200. Safe has surpassed Yuri, and Quesarado is simply untouchable. He's good, don't get me wrong, but at 240K at an event like this, I just can't justify that one. I look at complexity and I'd love to pick somebody here, but I think even Grim is starting to show some inconsistency as of late. Halzerk at 205 is kind of a steal, but Halzerk also scares me. Some games he disappears. Will Halzerk show up for the NARMR and completely dismantle some of the American oppers? Yes. But right now I think Zevi is going to be the bane of his existence. I think Fallen has potential to outshine Halzerk. I think there are a couple of ops at the top of the pack that are actually going to outdo Halzerk, and so I skip complexity as I skip Furia. I'd love to double pick Pain, I really would, but the bottom of this group has gotten too expensive, and then we get to MIBR, the team that cost me, because it's not my fault, the NA Showdown Draft. Because of their online success, and I should have seen this last week for the NA Showdown, they're all way too expensive, and especially when their results are predominantly online. Look at when they come to Europe. Look at when they play on LAN. We don't get the star-studded performances out of Henny, Insani, and Ara Anazan. It's an online dominance that I was trying to bank on. So if you wonder why I'm dropping them after drafting them for Showdown, it's because I really thought that they'd be in their realm online, and now that they're not, I keep scrolling. I scroll to these teams that you don't even know. Yur, Bestia, Paqueta, Fuscao. I can't. I just simply can't bank my draft on players like that when I know there are top dogs with decades of experience. I'm talking Imperial for this one, okay? Not the Imperial that qualified for Rio as the last dance, but the team that Fallen didn't retire for. He has put this roster together, adding Cello and adding Joda, both of them with star performances as riflers and banking on Fallen's op ability. Right now, he's playing incredibly well. We've seen it here for Showdown, and I don't think that's going to change when we get on LAN. Fallen is a world-class Hall of Famer. And if he had shown some kind of shakiness as of late, if he was bottom fragging for this team, then maybe I wouldn't go in on it. But I think this is a better Imperial than what we've gotten in the last year and a half from the Last Dance formula. And so I'm going double Imperial because with all of the price tag changes, I think Imperial have slipped under the radar and are coming in very affordable. Joda is great, but Cello is $14,000 less. And I think that Cello's matches have been comparable to Joda. Is it possible Cello gets a little outperformed by Joda? Absolutely. But at $14,000 of a difference, when already these price tags are so inflated, I think you can't ignore Cello. And I don't think you can ignore Fallen. So I'm going double Imperial with Liquid and Pain. And that leaves me 164. What can we do with that? Well, you see, HLTV, while you were fudging the numbers with all the other rosters, they waited for the last minute submission of 0-0 Nation. And so if we scroll down to the doldrums, to the depths, to the dungeons of NACS, we find next 162. With all of the economic formula being messed with, it feels to me like Next has actually gotten away with something here. And normally, a player at $162,000 should scare the hell out of you. I would avoid it. That's like picking Advent. It's going to sink your draft. But go ahead and check out Next's stats at the RMR, or excuse me, at Pro League. where all of a sudden we started to see 0-0 Nation start to come into their own, we saw Next step it up a notch. If you go beyond Pro League, his stats are going to be horrifying. This is 100% a gamble. I think 0-0 Nation could qualify, just as likely as they'll miss qualification. But I think that because of the price tags on everybody else, we have to run a risk. We have to dive down low. And I'm not looking at like a Nitro 180X. That's not going to cut it. We need a real cheapo bronze player, and that is going to be Next. Is this a risk? Yes. I'm much more confident in my European RMR draft, but I do believe that the hard carry potential of Zevi, EliGE, and the combination of Cello and Fallen, that is so many points right then and there, and 3 teams that I think are pretty guaranteed qualifications that I'll let Next bring us down a bit. Worst case, I think he'll take us out of the top 10%. We'll still end up finishing top 20. That's my bet there. And so I present the Merfolk, the Mermaid Men, basically because EliGE from Liquid is included. Multi-fragger on Zevi, because that lets us free up the main op for Fallen. Defender on EliGE, entry for Cello. Look at the activation rates here. I think that this draft works really well for roles. 47%, 26%, 43 on entry, 94 on main op, and the headshot machine himself Next at 45. If Next comes into his groove, I think there's a reason that 0-0 Nation didn't replace him. We were waiting for their 5th to be announced for the RMR. They brought him back from Pro League because he had a good showing. I'm telling you, recently, Next is playing above his price tag. He is still a liability. He is still very much a risk. But I think that risk will be 100% worth it to go for the carry potential of these other 4 players. If you don't want Nexts, then I present to you this alternative. coldzera in his place. Again, we're going down to 0-0 Nation, but Cold is somebody who, just like Next, isn't reflecting in his price tag. 194, under 200K for coldzera. If we were at the actual major in the first stage, I wouldn't go for it. But I did use Cold at the RMR in Stockholm for Rio. Worked wonderfully. So I've got faith in him. This is still a double Imperial pick, as I went for Cello, replaced Fallen with Bolts, because again, we're bringing up that floor. And look at the drop-off you have to deal with when you don't go for the 162 on Nexts. You lose Fallen, you lose EliGE, but you still keep Zevi. And you have to keep Zevi because he will end this RMR as the highest rated player, I swear to God. I swear. I've gone for Nekiz as the secondary pain pick here. Again, this is if you don't really want to go for Liquid or if you don't really want to go for Next. I present this as an alternative. I think Bolts is a very safe bet. And the reason I go for Nekiz versus Hardzao is just because of LAN ratings. As we can see here, the LAN ratings for Nekiz are just slightly higher than that of Hardzao. I think Hardzao gets bogged down in the LAN environment, and Nekiz is $1,000 less. This second draft comes down to 0 remaining in the budget, but if you truly want to win when it comes to the Monterey RMR, then I'm telling you right here, folks, it's the Merfolk. Remember, 3 rules of fantasy. 1, you know best. Don't let me tell you what to do. Number 2, talk that shit. Get your ass down to the comments. Let me know what you think about this remote setup. Of course, these fantasy videos coming to you from across the globe. And we can, of course, see the EUB RMR next week, as that'll be happening in Copenhagen. I'll record the video in Monterey. And make sure you guys check the pinned comment as well, as if I make any last-second adjustments to this team, to this draft, to this roster, I will present it as a response to the YouTube video on my Twitter. YouTube, Twitter, replies, you know what. Go hunting, go finding, look for the information, the keys, the clues, the solutions. They're out there. And I'm out there. See y'all for the next one. Scrawny with the skinny. Thanks for watching Fantasyland.